Hello, tech friends, and thank you for tuning into Emerging Technologies in Business, where we take a deep dive into different technologies that are impacting businesses today and in the very near future. I'm your host, Brock Riney, and this podcast is brought to you by Kincannon XR. Let's talk tech. Today, I'm actually joined by Kyle Jackson, the CEO and co-founder of Talespin, where they bring together domain expertise from computer vision, machine learning, game design and development, enterprise IT, business transformations to architect ways to change how we do work today. Talespin is an immersive VR experience to train employees on soft skills. And to be honest with you, it's in the most interesting way I've ever experienced before. So I'm very excited to be joined by our guest, Kyle. Kyle, how's the day going so far for you?
Good. Thanks, Brock. Thanks for having me.
Well, Kyle, I want to take a quick minute and give everybody a quick elevator pitch of what Talespin actually is and what it can do for the e-learning community.
It's always a fun question to kind of try to start to unpack because what we've had to do, so we're about 6 years in, and we've had to tell a slightly different version of that story as the world started to have a better understanding of what we were trying to do. And so right now, most people know us as a no-code platform that helps to develop soft skills training modules that can be experienced in VR and on desktop in a really immersive manner. But it's on a path towards building what we consider a spatial learning experience platform. And so as you start to better understand the shift that we're in the middle of and how these new modalities being VR and augmented reality really start to transform our relationship to learning and our relationship to productivity. It really there's a lot more innovation still ahead. And so each chapter we build on the last one, and I think we did find a use case. I think that, even your point, Brock, like we did find a use case that was really novel. It probably was not the first place that most people's minds went when they saw VR early on in this wave. And it's really, caught a very strong tailwind. So
it really has. I've got to tell you, just from experiencing firsthand, it's super immersive, completely. Obviously, I'm utilizing it inside of the Oculus Quest 2 and going through one of the modules. It was amazing to me first how wrong I was most of the time. I've got a sales background, so I don't necessarily have the soft skills that good folks that would be in HR or leadership would have. And it was amazing to me how many times I got the wrong answer, like definitively the wrong answer the first time. But what I really liked about it was it gave you the opportunity to learn over time and to develop that skill as you're going through the training modules. And I think that that's something that's been missed and lost in a lot of the modern day training that I've taken over my lifetime. And it just showed a really good breath of fresh air of something that was not only intuitive as far as forcing me to only pay attention to what I'm doing because I'm inside of it at the time. There's no other distractions. There's no longer, I'm going to do 10 minutes of this training and then go do something else for 15 and then come back and forget everything that I forgot or already learned already. Yeah. But what I liked about it was that it gave that really quick ability for me to learn what that new process or new skill would be and then immediately be able to reapply it and try that scenario again. So over the long term, I'm sure you're seeing really great long-term success.
Yeah, we are. And you hit on a bunch of components that are kind of why it makes it so special. So, and special in a lot of different use cases, but even more special when you apply it to soft skills first. So, if you think about, well, let me go back just a quick minute as to why we actually started here. So we were looking at just the power of the medium, and this idea of kind of spatial software, right? And our ability to interact with content differently and what that could mean for learning outcomes. That was the origin. And then as we got into that, we started doing a study of where every leading organization or think tank in the world was saying skills were trending. And from like 2012 to probably 2016, every year these lists would start to come out. And every year, people were just predicting more and more of the top 10 skills were soft skill related. And so I was said, well, we should really think about how to potentially use the power of this medium in that area. And then we started to unpack it a little bit more. And of course, when you think about leadership or sales or managerial training or de-escalation training or any of these communication skills, the way we've done it prior was a combination of just video-based learning, like watch these principles and then, good luck in the world, which is not going to be effective. Or classroom-based learning where, you bring people in, you have impactful speakers and you teach people kind of the core skills, and then you allow them to role play in the room. And, people generally walk away with a more meaningful experience there. But both of those completely lack what this is, right? Which is that here you've got a completely safe place to fail in practice, right? You're not being judged amongst a bunch of peers in a room, which none of us enjoy that process. It's funny, even talking through this over the years with different facilitators, even the facilitators don't enjoy the process of getting rooms to role play. So it's nobody likes it. I don't know why we keep doing it, but we probably won't for much longer. But and so the idea is that now you have this kind of safe place to fail, and in addition to that, because we're using real time technology and we're understanding what you say, and we're looking at your decisions on a almost per interaction basis, we can give you real time feedback too. So we can give you coaching in the moment, and it's a combination of those two things that then turn this into like kind of I wouldn't even put it in the same category as the old trainings, because and so once we saw that early on, we said, okay, well, this, we're hearing over and over and over again that because of how technology is disrupting the rest of work, the most important thing that we're going to need to rely on is our ability to communicate with each other and navigate uncertainty, because we're going to live in a world where things just keep changing really fast. And so we need to be great collaborators. We need to be able to give really clear feedback. We need to be able to de-escalate situations that are going to happen often that we cannot predict. And so we said, let's wait in there as the starting point for what a spatial learning experience platform might actually look like when you think about it more holistically. And we have seen like pretty insane results out of that. There's a widely quoted, a widely referenced study that PwC did with us early on in the XR industry, and what they saw was we were generally seeing about 4x. We were about 4 times faster to actually complete the trainings. So you're doing it, so that was a substantial savings over the other methods they could have used. People, as you said, a lot more focused. You really can't not engage. So so I don't even know where how you get a statistic of 4 times more focused, but I would just say it's like more of like a 1 or a 0. Like I'm focused on my outcomes and my learning objectives and my behavior change, or I'm probably not. But
it's either I am or I'm not. It's no longer that I have that 15-minute video to watch, right? And I click it, and then I'm going to go do something else and not watch any bit of it whatsoever. Not saying I've ever done that, not throwing myself under the bus in that way, but when you have the headset on, it gives you that spatial awareness that you have to be engaged. And I can see where that 4x number really comes in, because you have to be that much more engaged with the scenario that you're seeing, and it feels more engaging.
Yeah, I think well, that's another piece. It's more enjoyable too, right? That was one of our 100%. Our key. One of our key value drivers as a company has always been this has to be fun. This has to actually be enjoyable. We're entering a period where like basically every single one of us has to just be actually looking forward to the continual development of our skill set. Right. And I would argue that wasn't how a large portion of us viewed it, the last like 20 years. It's kind of like, oh man, I got to learn another new thing. Yeah. Check the box at the time. Yeah. And so that engagement factor is huge, and so you really have to find ways to again, move the needle on that. So that people actually desire, to kind of become infinitely curious and just keep coming back, because that's kind of what businesses. I mean, that's what we all need to do at this point. That's just the reality of the world we live in.
Well, and I think the biggest thing that I saw is that it's uniquely humanized, right? Your characters that are inside of the training, they don't act as if the stereotypical training characters are going to be in this perfect scenario, which is what we're almost always handed
Yeah,
inside of training. In here, it's not a perfect scenario. It's your ability where you're going to anger someone to the point where you're ready to fire them and they're banging their hands on the table. And that's life. That's the
yeah,
reality of it. And I think that was probably one of the beautiful things that I saw going through the application and seeing that this is what a real life scenario looks like, but you're not going to be able to train for this unless you have something like this,
yeah.
because you're not going to run into those scenarios on a day-to-day basis. You may run into them once a year, maybe 2 or 3 times a year. But what I love about how the training setup is for you guys is it prepares you for when that instance does arise, right?
Hmm.
So was that the initial intention, was to make it feel authentic, or
Yeah,
what was the decision to make it go that way?
yeah, it was. So, I mean, there was some different success measures that we kind of outlined. So one is obviously if you're going to go down the road of soft skills, you're trying to be able to affect and measure behavior change. There's honestly not actually ever been measurable before. I mean, maybe periodically over the course of several years, if you looked across performance reviews, you could kind of go, oh wow, now they have certain leadership skills that they didn't used to have, but it's not really like an easy objective measure of a lot of these soft skills. And um, so one of the things that we thought would be most important to actually affecting that behavior change is realism. And so emotional realism was where we really focused, not so much like visual realism. It's about emotional realism. And I think a really simple example is if you sit in one of the modules, at least the thing that often first kicks me back, but then when I think about it, I'm like, oh, the reason it kicks me back is actually a bias, which is that our virtual humans are not a lineup of supermodels. These feel like real people. These feel like your colleagues. These feel like people that you would interact with. And if you've gone into other in your example of watching the video of the perfect scenario, right, and with the perfect people, perfectly dressed in a perfectly decorated office, like it just doesn't, it just some of that doesn't actually feel real, and then it feels like you're watching this facade. And so part of that emotional realism is all of those aspects, and being kind of human centered about it, and thinking about, well, it's not just being able to have good micro expressions and having good animation systems that can convey emotions and things like that. It's actually even just the quality of who you're sitting across from. Do they feel real? Is there a persona behind that? Like, we design personas behind all the characters, just so that we actually feel like, okay, well, you feel like you almost know them. They're not just a 3D avatar. And so that I think does help with, one of the other things that we saw is people reported that they were, 3 to 4 times more emotionally connected to the content, and that same PwC study. So, that's the type of stuff that's like, okay, well, now that's a measure that's going to translate to behavior change, because these topics are things that you have to actually feel and digest and then change.
Well, and I can tell you first-handedly, and we were speaking before we started the show today, I literally did one of these, and I started noticing that I was sweating when I
Yeah.
was having the conversation. And I don't get nervous around people. It doesn't bother me, but it was, for whatever reason, I felt myself inside of the moment, and I didn't want to say the wrong thing in order to anger the end employee any further than what I already had. But it was funny because it gives that visceral reaction of, you're seeing what you're saying and how it's being interpreted. And a lot of the times we all live in our own first person view,
Yep.
and we don't realize the return on some of the things that we say and how they get interpreted and how it internally affects other people as well. And I thought that was such a amazing divestiture from the standardized training that I've seen in the world right now.
Yep.
It's really, really, really exciting. I'm really excited to see what's coming next from you guys. I did have to ask you a question though. What was the name Talespin? Where did that come from? And I hope it was the cartoon character Baloo I watched when I was a kid. But if it's not, I'll understand too.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I used to love the Disney afternoons, but that's actually not where it came from. the idea is first as a startup, you want to create something that's memorable. So we said, okay, we had a list of names that like we thought if we walked into a cold room in a nascent space in 2015 and tried to educate people on some crazy technology, like how could when we walked out of the room, could they remember us? So we had a list of short names, but the actual concept was that let's take. So at the time, I was having a lot of conversations where people were perceiving the pace of change that was coming in the workforce as a very negative force, right? And that everybody's losing their jobs and everybody's it was doom and gloom, right? So it was kind of the negative version of a tailspin, and that was when you talk to enterprises about their talent development practices or their workforce transformation processes and things like that, like it had a real negative tone. I said, we got to, this has got to get flipped because, first we have to get people to be actually excited about the changes in their own development inside of this now rapidly changing world. And so we decided, let's take that negative concept, flip it on its head and go out into the market and say, like, unless you're willing to embrace this, there just isn't a future. and I'd get asked constantly, well, why that name? And I'd tell them a story, and then we'd walk out of the room, and people would remember us, and we'd get a call, 9 months later. I still remember that meeting that we had, and so it was a half of a branding trick, for memorability, and really, but kind of more of a founding ethos, I think, to what we're trying to do, which is there's just a lot of these forces that are at play now because of where we are in the development of technology and our society that. I think we would be better to look at them in a more positive or an optimistic spin, and
Yeah.
so we've done.
That makes perfect sense. I had to ask because I just had no idea.
Yeah.
I figure people want to know one way or the other. So for you, Kyle, I always like to ask everybody that comes on the show, like, what is one piece of technology that you simply can't live without? For me, it's Apple AirPods. They're probably in my ears 18 hours a day. But for you, what's that for you?
Oh boy. One of the things that I've actually really started to enjoy a lot, and I do use every day, which is kind of in the same vein of the AirPods, is I have several pairs of sunglasses that have the embedded audio in the frames, so it's kind of on the way to augmented reality glasses, right? And the convenience of that is so great, and so I use it for conference calls all the time. I use it for taking notes and, calling up voice assistants and all that stuff. So I'd say that's one that if you haven't tried, it's also a great proxy to like kind of thinking about computing differently, because it's kind of weird to just be walking around your neighborhood wearing like, your sunglasses and talking to yourself and yeah, asking questions about the weather or whatever. Can I get a reservation here? Or say, call my dad, and it just does it. It's this kind of idea of ambient computing,
Right.
which is very similar to obviously all of the little smart home speakers that we have in our house. I think I always thought that would be something that I wouldn't use as much as I do, and it's really become ambient. Like I don't like both, and honestly, it's interesting just to watch my wife adopt that because I'm much more of an early adopter than she is, but. We're constantly both just using it for all sorts of stuff throughout the day. And so I look at that as a predictor, right, of where we're heading with this kind of spatial computing aspect, where once I can have, kind of on-demand visual components in AR, and I can have that type of ambient computing, I get super excited because I love computers. I grew up, learning to code and design stuff, but I also hate computers. I'd like to be outside more, and I'd like this to be, so it's like the idea of being able to get the best of both worlds is just, like mind-blowingly awesome. So that's what that's the thing I'm probably most excited about.
I think that's the true dichotomy of all of us who really love tech, because we all really love tech, but also understand that we need to separate ourselves from it sometimes. And it's just such a tough balance that you have to go through. So follows up with the same question, but a different version of it. What's one piece of tech that if you could eliminate from this world, what would it be?
Oh boy.
Mine would be any sort of pop-up ads. Like if I could eliminate pop-up ads my life, for the rest of my life, I'd be okay with it.
I agree. That one is honestly, I'd even go one step further. I would say incentive structures that are like the entire freemium incentive structure of using personal data.
Yes. Okay.
You know,
I
like
completely get behind.
yeah, like I just want the trades to be more equitable. If I'm going to give you a lot of my time or my data, um, I want to feel like I'm getting something equal in return. And I'd say that early on in those models, that was probably a pretty fair trade. Like if you thought about the first time you got free email or first time you got a free video streaming service or whatever, like that was like, whoa, I used to pay a lot of money for this, and then it felt pretty good. I think now I would say most of these trades, I feel like I'm kind of at the bad receiving end.
It's a 95 to 5% split now. They're getting the
Yeah,
majority. There's no doubt. Whereas,
yeah,
before it used to be sign up for a free email and you're fine, but you're also giving your personal information there. It was a good 1-to-1 trade off. Now it feels a lot more like a 20-to-1, doesn't it?
yeah, it does, and I think it's reflected in like you look at your Instagram feed now. Like I would say, I don't opt in I opt out of a ton of stuff, and it's
Right.
still the utility of that for me has nearly gone away, which is sad because I think there's some really fun aspects to some of these tools, but I would say anything that falls in that category, I get excited about thinking of how could you rebalance that to be a more kind of equitable trade between the
Yeah.
user and the platform.
Makes perfect sense. Now, I know Tailspin is always in the market looking for new developers, new designers, but what's in the next 6 to 12 month plan for Tailspin? Anything that you I understand if you can't,
Yeah.
but anything you can share with us that might be on the horizon?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been working since the last funding round on some larger partnerships to kind of help accelerate the whole market here. And so that's broader than just soft skills content. It's again kind of going towards that notion of a spatial learning experience platform. We got a kind of a strong view on what we think that should look like, and again, like what's the user experience like? What are the concepts we're trying to get them to buy into to really embrace why go to one of these learning destinations? So you'll see a lot of that coming to fruition. We're like I said, we're building some pretty large products with some global leaders in education and workforce transformation, corporate training. So hopefully you'll see it expressed in several different places. And then as a part of that, we really have a shifting need, internally for talent. So besides just developers and learning experience designers and product managers and all the people that we need to help mature the platform, we're also really starting to foster a lot of community, because our view of what we'd like to try to do here is somewhere between like what you've seen with Udemy, which is kind of like a creator platform, creator and a publishing platform for individuals to publish training content and monetize their knowledge. Awesome. And it really it lets everybody kind of be in the game in that area. So if you think about that creator economy and you think about Roblox as another model where, it's also a creator economy, it's a world building place. It's obviously for gaming, but if you bring those two concepts together, that's really where you start to have this notion of what we're trying to build, and the no code platform is obviously a first pillar of that. But there's a lot more. We've got to do there before we're really truly where we want to be. So
It's so
we
great that you
it's always yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just think it's interesting. Obviously, it's such a universal platform that can be utilized, and obviously, it's mainly for gaming. But the idea is only this far away from being a reality in the world of business and being adapted, like
Mm-hmm.
you were just saying. And I've heard that more than once, and I think that that's such a great idea to have, to meld the two together in order to make it functionality work wise as far as the business world is concerned, because
Yep.
now it's just utilized for gaming, but there's so much more that it can be developed into.
Yep.
And it's great that you can already see that path is already there for you. And a lot of folks will end up seeing that game and be like, okay, well, that's just that. But people said the same thing about Minecraft 15, 20 years ago, and look what type of worldwide phenomenon that has turned into already.
Well,
I'm
and
not saying
I think what's interesting about Roblox is, they've created the rules for kind of creation in their little microverse, metaverse, whatever you want to call it. And then within those rules, obviously, people found very, very creative ways to do things that work across a broad spectrum of types of interactions. And so, if you take that into the business world and take it out of and of course, every game has an art style and it has a meta loop that gets those gamers to engage and all that kind of stuff. So, but those are usually more specific to the game concept. Where if you think about it in the business world, it's about how do I create the tools for people to build these small learning universes, which consists of obviously a virtual location, consists of interactions. So in the case of the soft skills, we talked about kind of the simulated conversations and interactions that you can have. In the case of objects and process-based learning, there's a different set of interactions. And then in the business world, of course, you need to be able to give people the tools to curate that in a way where they can achieve their business outcome. Where in Roblox, it's almost self-governed. It's like the players self-govern it, and they create rules of this Roblox society, and people agree to kind of go along. Where the business version obviously is a little bit different, but there's the core concepts are kind of similar, where you're trying to take no code or essentially really flexible tools to allow creators to build these learning modules and then little learning microverses. And so I use the Udemy model because they've done that in using video. They've given those tools and the publishing capability to accomplish that. So you think about those two things kind of coming together, and if you can visualize the what do we think this future of spatial software looks like, it starts to get pretty fun, and that's where I'd say we're getting closer and closer by the month now to be able to kind of fully express that after nearly 7 years. So.
It's crazy to think that it's already been 7 years on your end, but at the same time, I can already see just from my end how far ahead you are in the game from a lot of other folks that are inside of the space. And I got to tell you, Kyle, I'm super excited to see what Talespin brings to the table now and going forward. And for anybody that's watching our interview today, what's the best way for them to reach out to you? Let's say if they are a developer or a designer, or even if they just want to follow you on social media, anywhere specific you want them to go?
Our site's always the best because that's we really do try and keep that up to date with all the kind of relevant building blocks of what we're trying to do. So that's just talespin.com. And then I would say other than that, on Twitter, my handle is KJ Planet. And I'm not incredibly active on Twitter, but if anybody reaches out, I'm gonna see it. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you for being here with us. It was a great conversation with you today, Kyle. I really enjoyed getting to learn more about Talespin. And for all of our audience back at home, thanks for joining us for another episode of Emerging Technologies in Business. If you liked our content, feel free to put a like or a comment down below. We'll put some information for Talespin down below as well. And follow us on social media at ETIB Podcast or Canon XR. And we look forward to talking more tech with you guys the next time. Talk to you later.